And the consumer story says the right thing to do is to pursue self-interest, on the basis that self-interest will add up to the collective interest. So again, it is a story about what the right thing to do is. And this is why I think it's been so sticky. Like the Milton Friedman expression, the social responsibility of businesses to maximise its profits is an expression of consumer logic. And what I believe we're living in right now, I think, is the collapse of that story, and therefore of the institutions and systems and processes that arise from that story. Because you can't solve the challenges of our time from within its logic, because the story created the challenges. So you can't solve a crisis of loneliness and mental ill health from within a story that says we're independent, isolated individuals. You can't solve crises of inequality from within a story that says that the path to success is competition, that's the dynamic that will make everything better. And most fundamentally, you can't solve ecological crises from within a story that says we're separate from nature, and that success and individual happiness is about material standards of living. So that story's collapsing, and the subject story is back because of the collapse, because in the uncertainty of collapse, the certainty that's offered by strongman leaders is very attractive.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with me, Dan Burgess. The story of Spaceship Earth is simple. We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. Like a spaceship, we have a finite amount of supplies with an intelligent operating system called nature, which keeps everything replenished as long as we all respect it and participate wisely. In this podcast, I'm in conversation with folk involved in regenerating life, shifting consciousness and reimagining how we can live more beautifully and peacefully. I talk with artists, writers, activists, designers, adventurers, healers, farmers, creative mavericks, and more. Their stories invite us to participate in the co-creation of life-sustaining cultures, in service to life, becoming crew on Spaceship Earth. Greetings, Earthling. Welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast. And breathe. I hope you're holding it down out there, wherever you are, managing to stay afloat in these turbulent and increasingly, I would describe, absurd times. I'm recording this the morning after a weekend where another 900 innocent, peaceful protesters, many of them elderly, have been arrested in London for protesting an ongoing genocide in Gaza. Let that sink in. Being arrested for holding up a sign peacefully protesting against the massacre and murder of innocent human beings. This is where we are at. And so how to hold both the beauty and miracle of being alive on this earth for some of us. I'm looking right now into my garden and the sun is streaming through and there's these kind of autumnal vibes. Everything's kind of beginning to surrender and collapse, the plants and the leaves and the trees. The composting journey is being beckoned, and the joy and possibility of what could be is there all the time, along with these horrors and monstrous atrocities that we are witnessing in this moment. And sitting with these extreme contradictions is, for me at least now, the biggest challenge that we're being invited into. Not to run away from them or deny them because they are uncomfortable, fearful and inconvenient, and bring this phrase to mind that I'm working with. How can we learn to dance with complexity, contradiction, grief, beauty, horror, mystery and surprise without abandoning the dance floor? supporting each other in becoming active participants in co-creating life-sustaining cultures, working towards regenerative futures in service to life, becoming crew on Spaceship Earth, as we say around here. And so this tees me up with this episode with the extraordinary human being that is Jon Alexander. Jon is the author of the critically acclaimed book Citizens, Why the Key to Fixing Everything is All of Us, which he wrote with Ariane Conrad. He is the co-founder of the New Citizenship Project, a strategist, a speaker and connector, and he's a relentless force helping to open up a truly alternative vision of a citizen-led future, rooted in the deep truth that all of us are indeed smarter than any one of us, and that this is still possible despite the shit we're in, and perhaps only because of the shit we're in. Jon moves between many spaces in society and culture, from political and future democracy spaces to business and youth movements, and most critically, in my opinion, at the grassroots, working with communities and projects and people-powered pioneers who are showing the way about what is already possible when we look beyond the dominant stories of subjects and consumers which have dominated our culture for as long as most of us have ever known. Jon is also a dear friend of mine. We worked together in the late 2000s in the advertising and brand communication world. I would call us early mischief makers, trying to raise awareness of the incompatibility of the core idea of global consumerism on a living planet with ecological limits and boundaries. We then embarked on the same master's program, a life-changing action learning program in sustainability and responsibility. Jon also sowed the seeds for probably the most creative, madcap, experimental and joyful project that I've ever been a part of, the feature-length documentary Project Wild Thing, and the subsequent launch of the Wild Network, which began in 2012 on a mission to rewild childhood in the UK. Jon and I have remained close encouragers of each other's explorations and work evolutions over the last 15 years. I have huge admiration for Jon and all that he is, not only his vision, intelligence, tenacity, his enormous courage and energy, but also for his humility, his honesty, compassion and awareness, and his dedication to continue in evolving himself, to keep learning and unlearning on what is his to do in these unprecedented times we find ourselves in. He's a remarkable human with a huge heart. This is the second time Jon has been on the Spaceship Earth podcast. He joined me in episode 40 in 2021. And this conversation is also special to me because it was recorded on the land at Ghostwood Down near Bath, which is a regenerating land project near my home, of which I'm a guardian and a steward. It's where we have started to offer this year deep transformation work, nature-based rites of passage, overnight nature solos, through our Becoming Crew Action Learning Collective. Jon came on our first community solo in April and had a very powerful experience overnight on the land. And he reached out to me early summer to see if he could return for another overnight solo. So we arranged for Jon to come back, for me to guide him alone for 24 hours. And before he set out for the night, we sat around the fire pit. The fire wasn't on because I think it was about 90 degrees in the roundhouse, and recorded this conversation. And for me, seeing Jon really deepening his own ecological and more than human explorations and relationships, and how he's exploring weaving that into an evolving story of ecological citizenship is beautiful and exciting to witness. So this is a deep, honest, intimate, emergent conversation, which was very much unplanned in its direction. It doesn't avoid the complexity and uncomfortableness of these times, but there's also much joy and possibility in our riffing. It was recorded in the middle of July, and I feel that it's landing now, perhaps in an even more relevant context in this moment we're in. There's much in here to contemplate and consider as we face into the enormity of what is happening to the stories and systems and structures that we've been living by for as long as most of us know, and also what is emerging, what is possible, and what is ours to do, individually and collectively, as citizens, as Jon would say, as crew, as I would add. And if you like the sound of the overnight solo experience that Jon is speaking to in this episode, we have a couple of spots left on our last community solo of the year, which is on the autumn equinox, 19th to 21st September. I'll put the link in the show notes. And if you want to stay updated on our on-land online offerings, which are actually all about deepening our connections, our relationships with the earth, with land, with nature, with each other, in order to grow our capacities, our courage, our creativity, and our resilience to step into these hugely uncertain times, find out what is ours to do in service to life on board this mysterious, life-giving rock called Earth. Then, if that's speaking to you, check out becominggrew.com. So, that's my ramble done and dusted. Let's cut to this. This is the Spaceship Earth in conversation with Jon Alexander. Enjoy.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
Jon, welcome back to this. Welcome back to the Spaceship Earth podcast, and welcome back to Ghostwood Down.
2 returnings in 1.
Yeah, I know. It's this feels quite special, actually.
Oh.
It's the first time I've tried to have a conversation for the pod on this land, and it feels very appropriate that it's you because you've spent some time here,
and we've stuck our noses into each other's lives a little bit over the last 20 years.
We have a little bit. I know. Yeah, so I guess all of that feels right to be road testing, recording up here with you, and
I can hear the breeze in the trees now. I hope people can pick that up. That's going to be nice.
It's How are you showing up? How are you arriving?
I'm pretty good. It's been a crazy 6-7 months. I personally and professionally, we won't go too far into this for obvious reasons, but a big personal life change, kind of end of a long relationship at the end of last year, and throwing myself into the work as well, and the two are related to a degree, but really throwing myself at this work of trying to sort of be a storyteller and a cheerleader maybe of the citizen in everyone. And it's meant I've been travelling like a mad thing. I've been all over. I've been to the US 3 times. I've been working with the youth movement in Poland, and a collective action workshop in Germany, and a big conference in Berlin as well, and done stuff in Spain, and I've been bouncing around like a madman. And I'm at the end of that real run, and as you know, in the middle of that, right in the middle of it, in April, I came on a community solo here at Ghostwood Down, and it was a very important kind of centering for me, when I knew, I started to be able to see that I needed to pause a bit and let this spell of running at the world or running with the world or dancing with it like a lunatic come to an end. It felt very quickly like being here again was the right thing to do. So I'm so tired. But but actually feeling pretty good, and like I have some faith in myself and the decisions I'm making and what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking this morning. I had a little glance back, and it was 2021 when we recorded a conversation. When we put an episode out, and I think I remember recording it. It was recorded online. I think it might have been in lockdown.
It was, yeah. I remember being sat on a sweaty sofa. I think it was hot. I feel like it was the summer again.
Well, it was, and
staring at a screen for the nth hour.
That's it. And I think it was also close to when. I think it was close to when George Floyd was murdered. I think I have a sort of sense that might have been around that time. I can't remember. Maybe I got that wrong, or just after, or. But we, and you, I think, were you writing your book then? Was that?
Yeah. So Citizens, I finished writing in November 21, so I would have been right in the midst of it at that point.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, I'm just thinking, because a lot has happened since you put that book out into the world. And I'd love to chat about some of that, what has happened. And, you've been, I often have seen you just as this extraordinary energy that sort of pops up all over our space.
Once you enter my echo chamber, there is no departure.
With this book, there was a time, when it was around, it was the Citizens book, and it was just, but so much has happened. You've created this kind of, it feels like a slipstream, and just opening up space. It feels like for people really to I think sort of connect with the ideas that you've been speaking to, and you're always coming from that place of it's about us, it's about the people, and then there's all these things that are surfacing in the slipstream, and like you say, some of them are things that have been going on forever, which are just we're starting to sort of see more, but also it feels like there's this, more folks are beginning to kind of step in and find their thing. And so I'd love to talk a bit about that, but I wondered, for those who don't know the Citizens book and the sort of premise of the work, but maybe you could just give us a little bit of that, whatever that,
sure. I mean, I think the way I've come to understand what I'm doing and what the book is really, it's an offer of a way of seeing the moment in time we're living in. That does not pretend to be kind of it's all going to be fine, and yet also does offer some hope. So, and at least this has a degree of positivity to it. So basically, really, the really simple version, the offer I make is of a way of seeing the moment in time we're living in through the lens of what I call stories of self and society. And there are 3 stories that I work with. And the easiest way to introduce them is as a sort of historical shift. And so very briefly, my argument is that at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, we lived... the dominant story of self and society at the time was what I call the subject story. And in the subject story, the right thing to do is keep your head down, do as you're told, get what you're given, on the basis that the God-given few who run society know best, and they will lead us to the best outcomes for society as a whole. Now, the critical thing about all 3 of these stories is that they are ideas of how the best society results. They are stories about what is right to do. They are moral stories in a sense. And that story, the subject story, kind of fell apart end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th. And then out of the 2 world wars and through the second half of the 20th century, we more or less deliberately, more or less consciously created and built institutions and so forth out of what I call the consumer story. And the consumer story says the right thing to do is to pursue self-interest on the basis that self-interest will add up to the collective interest. So again, it is a story about what the right thing to do is. And this is why I think it's been so sticky. and like the Milton Friedman expression, the social responsibility of businesses to maximise its profits, is an expression of consumer logic. And what I believe we're living in right now, I think, is the collapse of that story. And therefore of the institutions and systems and processes that arise from that story. Because you can't solve the challenges of our time from within its logic, because the story created the challenges. So you can't solve a crisis of loneliness and mental ill health from within a story that says we're independent, isolated individuals. You can't solve crises of inequality from within a story that says that the path to success is competition, that's the dynamic that will make everything better. And most fundamentally, you can't solve ecological crises from within a story that says we're separate from nature, and that success and individual happiness is about material standards of living. So that story is collapsing, and the subject story is back because of the collapse, because in the uncertainty of collapse, the certainty that's offered by strongman leaders is very attractive. And something else is also happening. So all of that is really like 20 pages of the book. And the rest of the book is saying there's a whole other thing, there's a whole other story, which is the citizen story. And that's actually a much older, much deeper, much, I would argue, truer story of humanity, which says that actually the right thing to do is to contribute your ideas, energy and resources to the pursuit of the best outcomes, and to reimagine and maybe recreate our institutions to tap into that collective energy, wisdom, resource. Because the actual logic, the thing that really holds, isn't that self-interest will add up to collective interest or that there are a few who know best. It's that all of us are smarter than any of us. And so what I did with the book, from where I was at that time, end of 2021, was offer as complete a view as I had at that time after 7 or 8 years of working in New Citizen Project on these and working with organisations and tracking stories from around the world, offer as complete a view as I could of something that I thought was possible and emerging. And I think what's happened since is that there's a lot has happened since, as you allude. Like, the book actually was published in March 2022, and I think I did the first event a week before the first tanks rolled across the Ukrainian border, just to land us in that particular version of history. But also I've become increasingly convinced that it is happening, that the citizen story is emerging, and it's everywhere. And I've been all over, from a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere in Montana to the slums of Nairobi, learning about that and seeing it, and it's made me like defiantly convinced that if only we can see that possibility and step into it, then incredible things are still possible, even though we are about to enter arguably one of the most difficult periods of human history.
Yeah, that's a lot there.
Just a little bit, mate. It's light. I'm a light guy.
Yeah. How would you like... so I'm really interested in... Yeah, as you know, but I guess for me, I'm constantly exploring this kind of... which I think is very much part of what you're exploring, is this... it's perception, it's how we relate, it's how we perceive, it's how we see things. But also at this time... as these stories, let's say the consumer story, which for me, when I think of this, it makes me think of like, how mainstream media try to keep controlling a narrative of what is going on in the world, right? For me, that's how I see things often. That's a story that's being held, which increasingly more of us understand is nonsense. But there is still, it's still trying to almost keep us locked into this way of going about our days and our lives. But I'm really interested in, how we're kind of sensing things, as beings, how we actually sensing the realities. And so you're moving around the world a lot, and you're spending a lot of time with what I always find fascinating with what you do is you're moving between so many different parts of our societies and systems. You might find yourself in a quite sort of, you're doing a lot of work around alternative democracies, or the reimagining of democracy, let's say. But you'll be, like you say, you'll be on the streets with a community that are doing something extraordinary, and then you're everywhere in between. But what are you sensing? And I know it's hard to sort of sense a sort of to speak for a mass, but what are you sensing the energy that I always go to the vibes are, but what are you sensing where people are at the moment? Things feel so extreme in so many ways to me, and I'm just like, what are you sensing as you're going around? Like, what's the kind of the feelings that you're picking up from people about where people are at? And I know it's hard to speak for big groups of people, but do you know what I mean? What's your sort of takeout when you're moving around? Because I mean, I struggle, I can struggle like daily with the overwhelm. How what are you sensing as you're going around? Where do you think people
That's
are
actually, I think what you just said about struggling daily as an individual with the overwhelm, and also I know you, and I know that you are both struggling with the overwhelm and you're doing amazing things, and both are true at the same time. And actually, I think that's, in that sense, I think you are a microcosm of the whole that I see. I think as what I'm picking up, I often think of all this work through the lens of that two loops model, the Bacana thing. To try and describe it for those listening, it's basically, if you imagine two semicircles, one sort of upside down and the other the right way up, or however you conceive of that. And there's the first, basically two. It's a sort of, if you were drawing a wave, it would be a kind of a cresting wave that's then rising, but offset. So the line snaps at a certain point, and the second and the rising wave is offset. And the idea of this image is to say that when things are really fundamentally changing, they don't fundamentally change seamlessly, and there is some discontinuity, to use a euphemism of the highest order. So there is a dominant system that is still dominant and is in decline, and we all kind of know it. In these moments of fundamental change. And that, I think, is what's going on with the consumer story right now, and all of the institutions that are born from it. Consumer democracy, where our only agency is to choose between a fixed set of options, and where we're assumed to make that choice on the basis of individual self-interest. Consumerism, consumer capitalism. I could go on and on, right? Like the consumer institutions, the consumer processes and structures don't work and are breaking. And we are all really struggling with that. And so one of the despair version, or the despair vibe, I see manifesting in a lot of different ways. And the one I'm most worried about, actually, is I've been coming across this phrase, conservative realism, particularly among young men. And the idea behind conservative realism is basically going, well, it's realistic to say that the world is falling apart. And therefore, it's realistic to prepare to be in a dog-eat-dog world. And therefore, it's realistic to kind of militarize. And in one sense, I think that's terrifying. But I also think when you start to understand it in that context, you have some sympathy with it, right? Like a lot of the young people who are being attracted to that logic, and older people, like it's not just, but young men is a big cohort for this. This is when you look at the transcripts of focus groups and things that are held with the young men who are voting for the AfD in Germany, or for that, this is what they're saying. And when you understand that, you can also have some sympathy with it, because you're like, yeah, I feel that crisis, I feel that decline, I feel the falling apart too. And you can say, well, actually, a lot of why they're turning in that way is because they're not being given another option, because a lot of the institutions are insisting on pretending that things aren't fundamentally broken, and so no one's validating their experience apart from the people who want to turn them into militarized nutters. But so to come back to a question and the Bacana thing, I basically what I'm saying is I see two things happening at once in increasing intensity as we come to the point where the line of the dominant system cuts off and collapses, and the question marks arise as to whether the emergent system, the citizen story, the institutions that we might build, the ways of working we might have, are sufficiently well designed and well manifested to kind of catch it. I see a kind of I see a scary intensity arising in the despair and the decline, and I see a huge energy in the emergent, and it's everywhere. But there is the third thing I would say. So you see the kind of the fear and the danger and the anger in the decline, and the energy and the possibility and the creativity and the spirit in the emergence. And then there's this third thing that I also pick up, which is a sort of which I also feel all of this is fractal, right? Like this is like which is a kind of panicky edge even to the emergent work. And I'm trying myself. I know that's in me. Like it's probably why I've been running around like quite such a lunatic. And I sort of also know that it's not the energy that the work demands. It's Bio's thing that you always have out here. You know, the times are urgent. We must slow down. It's the idea that the work of right now is to dance with the reality and not to try and impose on it. And the energy of panic is not the energy of dance, right?
Yeah, it's reminding me of there's a kind of phrase that I'm sort of exploring for exactly what you're speaking to, which is like learning to dance with complexity, fear, grief, beauty, surprise, without abandoning the dance floor.
yeah, I love it. Actually, it's funny. This is coming up. This metaphor is coming up a lot for me at the moment. There's a book on the Kali energy called Dancing with the Flames, and the Kali energy came up for me when I was here with you in April.
Tell us a bit more about that.
It's the energy of the sort of I mean I'm trying to learn about it and embrace it, but so this will be imperfect and
how you're experiencing,
how I understand it. Well, so what happened for me here? One of the exercises we did preparing to go out on the land. And maybe we should say, like, I'm back here to go out on the land on my own. I'm about to go out on a solo tonight.
Afternoon, actually.
Yeah, in the next couple of hours after we've had this and had a bit of food, and you've inducted me into your space. But
done some weird shit out.
We're going to do
some
weird shit. It's game on. We'll video that for you as well. But no, I came here to go out on the land back in April, and one of the exercises we did sort of in preparation for that was just a little thing that I kind of took the piss. I thought I was taking the piss out of, actually, if I'm totally honest. Where Eva got us to got us to make something out of what was lying around. And I put together like a bone that I found and an axe cover and into quite a scary shape, actually. And I was like, oh. Why did I do that? I sat with Ava and Mark and we talked about like the energy that I was bringing into the space, which was a kind of like a sort of a fighting, an anger, a rage, and but also a creativity, and as I understand it, that is the sort of Kali energy. It's scary. It's not a kind of Mother Earth fertile generativity. It's a rage, and I'm uncertain with that, and trying to understand the sort of the darkness of the goddess from Hindu mythology and or Hindu faith, and And yeah, so this book, Dancing with the Flames, was one of two that jumped out on me when I was in a spectacular bookshop called Perelandra in Fort Collins, Colorado. Again, we can talk about why I was there, but whatever. The other, which we might also refer to, which I've got beside me here, the book of poems called The Last Song of the World by Joseph Fasano. But this metaphor of dancing, and the way you describe it as well, this dancing with the darkness and not leaving the dance floor, comes up in this title of this book. And also I've been working with an elder, a storyteller, wonderful man called Jeff Mead. And Jeff is just happened to mention towards the end of our conversation that he's putting together a workshop called Dancing with Dragons. And so there's something in, and I had totally independently of both of those things said to someone close to me the other day, this thing about I slightly worry about this energy of panic because I fear that the energy of panic isn't the energy of dance, and I think the sort of dancing needs. It doesn't necessarily need relaxation. It might need rage, but it needs focus and energy. And panic feels to me like a distraction.
It's interesting because it makes me think I have panicked on the dance floor before.
Mate,
mind you, that
always.
was probably to what someone had given me to ingest.
I panicked post dance floor the other day because I realised someone had been videoing me when I was dancing. So there are different types of panic.
But I think I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because these are all of these these emotions, these energies that we're speaking to, which are really being these times are really opening us up to really feeling parts of ourselves maybe that we've never really experienced, and because we are obviously so entangled with everything that's going on, and I think that is what is listening to you speak. Hello, cow. Exactly. Don't panic out there. It's fine. But there's something about which is why I've been sort of deepening my practice into this type of work, because through my own experience I have recognized as well that this spaciousness, connection, spaces where we can open up to these things that in the constructed reality you can't really speak to, are feeling are very at odds with how the machine is trying to keep you going, and yet feel so vital. All of this, all of these energies that you're speaking to. Where's that panic coming from? What is that all about? It feels so important that we can really begin to know ourselves, our bodies, the places, these times quite intimately, and because clearly they are responses, right, to what is going on. And if we're not able to really understand, or maybe we will never understand, but at least to know, to become familiar, to become curious about what is happening, because this is going to become, it's already happening, right? I mean, people are freaking out everywhere, and that's only going to accelerate.
It makes me think, actually, there's we're sort of model bingo here, but there's another one that comes to mind, which I hadn't really pieced together with this until you were just talking, but the concept of safe uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And the idea, so this comes from a family therapist called Barry Mason originally, and he draws a 2x2 matrix of safety and certainty are the axes. And he says that anyone who comes for therapy tends to be in one of two positions. They're either unsafe, uncertain, I'm bad, I don't know what to do, and that's panic, right? Unsafe, uncertain feels like panic. And he says, or they're unsafe, certain, I'm bad and I know I am. And I think unsafe, uncertain is more relevant for us in this conversation. But what he says is that what people think they want and what sort of our society conditions therapists or practitioners or service providers or governments or whatever to try and offer is safe certainty. This is the fix. Consume this, right? That is the consumer story is deep within that. And you can't. It doesn't exist. Is his point? Like safe certainty is, especially in times like these and at the macros, there is no safe certainty. We don't know we're going to be all right. We don't know exactly what to do, and just because even if someone finds a way to work that works somewhere, we don't know that it'll work in another place. And there's something about, and then he says, safe uncertainty is the space we actually, a therapist needs to try and create, a local authority needs to try and create in relation to adult and child social care, but it's also the space we need to be in as humans. And I think maybe, and it's basically saying we don't know exactly what will work, but we do know that we'll stand side by side, and we do know that we're not bad. There's a lovely line in Joseph in one of the Fasano poems. He's got these one-liners that pop out at the end of poems. I love a one-liner. Yeah, the one that's in the first poem of this book. The closing line is, "Your life is not a crime." And he, sorry, I'm getting emotional just saying that. But he posted on social media the other day. He saying that he had been at the point of suicide when he wrote that poem, and writing it had sort of helped him hold on for a while. And then he'd been depressed again, and someone had come up to him in a cafe by chance the day that he was in a really dark place, and had said, "Are you Joe Fasano?" And he'd said yes, and she'd showed him her arm and had that line tattooed on her wrist. And I guess to this thing about how we individually, fractally, as humanity, be in safe uncertainty, not unsafe uncertainty, and not try and fucking pretend that there is such a thing as safe certainty, feels like a huge part of the question for me.
And just listening to you, and I'm thinking about your work, it makes me almost think again, like, you know, that there is still this sense that, you know, can you get to safe uncertainty but on your own? And even the story you've just mentioned, we can't do any of this alone. No. But that's the thing. So like, if we are able to open ourselves back up to land, to each other, to community, to create these practices and spaces where we're able to unravel, you know, and explore and open ourselves up actually to a hell of a lot more support and intelligence that we've been led to believe is available, you know. Yeah,
like part of the reason we're trapped hunting for safe certainty is because we've become so individualized, right? And I can I tell you one of the things that I've...
Tell me whatever you want to tell me.
So I'm writing again. I'm writing... I've just started the process of writing a second book, leaning particularly towards politics, because I believe that's where I think, unless our political systems shift, unless we stop trying to offer people safe certainty, we will push people,
and that guy.
Right, we will push people into the arms of fascism, and then we will have to deal with all of this shit from fascism, which I don't fancy, frankly.
And it's kind of already happening, right?
It's everywhere, right? Yeah. So anyway, without going too far into that right now, but one of the things I loved about writing Citizens and is these discoveries that you make that you're like, oh my God, as a storyteller, that is gold, and part of you's just reacting selfishly as a storyteller, but you're also like, this will resonate. I know this will resonate. So I made a little discovery the other day. There were 3 kind of massive intellectual innovations at the outset of what I think of as the consumer era. So just leading into and through World War II, that then became the foundational ideas of the consumer era and the institutions of the consumer era. GDP, 1937. IQ tests, 1939, which give you meritocracy and the idea that there are some who are smarter than others and should be in charge of everyone else. And the one I'm thinking of right now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, 1943. Now, the discovery that I made is that Maslow spent several weeks living with the Blackfeet Indian tribe, Native Americans, in 1938. And I'm oversimplifying a little bit. You'll find articles about this if you want to Google it, and I'm going to be writing about it more sophisticatedly. But he essentially ripped off and then corrupted their framework. So the underlying framework that became Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of individual needs, that gives us the assumed reality of individualism and materialism, was originally a 5-point kind of web of essentially of things that can only be achieved, that are all equally important and interconnected, and can only be achieved in community. So there should never have been a concept of individual self-actualization. There is only community self-actualization.
There are two stories on Spaceship Earth, a passenger story and a crew story. The passenger story is based on extraction, transaction and distraction, and it's leading us towards collapse. The crew story is based on connection, cooperation and participation. It leads towards regeneration.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
Well, you just used the word web, right? That is life. It's entangled. We're nothing without everything else, and that's what we're finding out. And yeah, exactly. So it's as this what I would call the sort of illusion of modernity starts to come apart. You know, the real challenge, as I say again, simplification here, but because for many of us, we've been in our heads just following orders in some ways, following the story, right?
Drawing from the story. We've been living within the story.
Right. And so the invitation now is, how do you re-entangle with all of what we now understand is fundamental to life, our relationship with things that are not just human, our relationships with each other, the understanding of our bodies, all of this stuff, right? What is fundamentally, responsibility, actually taking responsibility for this world we're part of, which, so there's a bunch of stuff that we're being invited into sort of quite rapidly starting to experiment with. But there's this tension in that so many of us don't quite know how to make those, do you know what I mean? Because it's almost a sort of the story runs so deep and has been so pervasive that kind of allowing yourself to let go of some of that to move into this, because re-entangling yourself back into a web, it requires some courage. It's not, and particularly if you're flat out trying to just make ends meet, or it's so as you always say, but we need each other. We need to find ways to access the land again, to find ways to open up, to create space where we can build this capacity to become part of webs of life again,
I guess, and maybe this is a bit of my role and my place, and we've talked about this many times over the years, like the fact that I'm a posh white boy, that I got given a 6 foot athletic, no disabilities, unintelligible by the existing system, by the consumer story. Like I win by that story. My part is to, maybe because my part is probably to be a kind of door opener rather than a full inductor. But for whatever reason, I don't see it as being that hard, actually. I think the letting go of the consumer story happens kind of an instant, and then the rest, we don't have to learn really kind of stringently and perfectly how to citizen, how to entangle. And even the word entangle I kind of fight a bit with, because it feels like it, I don't know, to me it feels like it adds a complexity. But like, let me make this real. So I'm really interested at the moment in like what the sort of bridge points, the things that start. And I love, I was in Paris last week. I was invited joyfully to be part of Rockcore, which is this model where the only way to get a ticket for a big exclusive gig is that you have to do 4 hours of volunteering.
I remember doing some work on that years ago when it was branded, supported by Orange. Remember the mobile?
There you go. Yeah. Orange Rockcore. It was Ibis Rockcore in Paris this year. But the reason I mention it is because the line that they use in English, it was give, get given. In France, it's tu donnes, tu reçois. You give, you receive.
Reciprocity.
There we go, my friend. And two things about it, really. Like one like a statistic. So a huge majority, I think it's something like 90% of the people who do the volunteering do it to get the gig ticket and have never done any before. But at least half of them go on to do more unrewarded, more volunteer unrewarded. I think there are that's a very conservative estimate based on survey response and all this kind of thing. They think it might be a lot more. And so from that you draw this idea that like actually that 4 hours is enough. And do you know what? I understand why, because the atmosphere at that gig was like nothing I've ever been to before. It was a big thing. It was like 15,000 people in the Accor Arena, like a big arena gig. All the more impressive then to have an atmosphere, because arena gigs generally, in my experience, are a bit dead. And the life and the connection between people. And then you see, but it wasn't really that. I did the volunteering as well, and the bonding and the connection that you have in the process of the volunteering is it as well. But that is all it takes. Like, and once you that Stephen, the guy who founded Rockcore, Stephen Green, has this lovely phrase. He says citizenship is a muscle you build, not a cup you empty. And then he goes on to say, like, when you start, the 4 hours is all it takes to start using it and start liking it, and then you want to develop it, and then from there, like, so this is one example of like a gateway, a kind of a stepping in, a starting, a letting go of the consumer story, and a starting to explore another idea. And I'm hesitating to pin my language onto it of citizen story, because there might be other languages for what we become. I think citizen is useful because it's a gateway word. It's a word that can be heard in the existing, but can help us through into a new. Just as Rockcore is a thing that can meet frustrated young people who don't know what they're hunting for, and let them into something. But just as, and like the Actionism platform is solely devoted to this. Like what are the things that you can start? And all of these things are gateways into a different, bigger, deeper, more nourishing, more joyful idea of ourselves. One that I would argue is characterized more by kind of responsibility, like finding our ability to respond to these times and going, God, this feels amazing to actually be able to do something. There's such joy, and that's what I've seen everywhere. Such joy in starting to inhabit something else.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that responsibility. I didn't say it very well, but I feel like again, the more you feel like you belong, the more you are able to respond to what you're being presented with in this world, you know. And so it's that ability to be able to navigate complexity and contradiction, because you have a sense that you are belonging to this world in some way beyond the separate story of individualism. But like you say, it is it's a muscle, it's practice, it's, you know, this is we're being invited, many of us, into very new behaviors, you know. And
what I would say is it is difficult to let go, right? And you're right, like the story, I wanted to say that stuff, but why I think what I'm bringing onto the land right now is today is a question of how do I actually let some of this stuff go, and for me, like, I have to do this. And I think, and in some ways it's not intellectual. Like I've let go of it pretty firmly, but it's in my heart and in my body. Like I can't quite. I'm not fully inhabiting the role I want to be, and I don't think yet. And so maybe it's better to just to be personal about this, right? Like I know I need to be here again. Well, I have a sense I need to be here again to be able to take another step into being fully available to this work and fully available to the relationships that of all kinds that are with land, with nature, with other humans, with individuals that are taking shape. To be fully available to them, I need some ritual and some space. And so if I do, then maybe we all, at some, like again, the fractals.
Yeah, well, I think what you're speaking to is something that we all need, we're all encountering, because I can't remember who said it. Was it Ken Kesey that he said something like, you know, it's only through ritual that you create knowledge. I guess it's this idea that we are these living things, right? And we're constantly being shaped by, you know, the context that we're in, how we've been educated, the systems we've moved through, the communities we've been part of, the things we've experienced. And we're also constantly being, you know, shaped by these other forces or externalities or what have you. And I think also we, like you say, you know, we can become... We create deep patterns of perception, how we see things, how we see ourselves.
There's a word that I've begun to really love, which is the word ceremony. Come across, I've been spending more time with Native American folks. So I came across the Blackfeet connection and one or two other things. But this word, this idea of ceremony, like, and that the ceremony is part of everyday life.
Yeah.
And it started to shape how I think about what advertising is as ceremony of consumerism, which, as you know, is a word I see as having a capital C and a hyphen between the R and the ism. It's like, it's a... And therefore, and maybe part of what I'm saying is I think a huge amount is achieved the moment you start to see that, the moment you start to see this as a constructed story that is being reinforced constantly, and you stop blaming individuals for being part of it, even those who are the priests of it. Which we both were, right? As people who worked in the advertising industry for a good long time. when you can see the power of ceremony as it's currently being exerted, you can free yourself from blame but you can also start to pay attention to what ceremony you do want to adopt.
Yeah, and this is this is fundamental to this work, which is what we would call self-generated ceremony. How do you support people to build the capacity to create self-generated ceremony based on their feeling, their needs in a moment in time that involves, with this work, obviously, that relationship between yourself, the more than human world, others in your community, but that ability to begin to know that you're constantly cycling and shifting, that we do get stuck in parts of ourselves. But how do we find ways through? Self-generated ceremony is one way of really helping that, to build that kind of way of being.
And maybe it's safe. It's like a way of creating safety in the uncertainty
That's
as
it.
well, right?
That's it. So and that's, for me, that is the responsibility. It's the ability to respond, to go, I'm feeling panicked, overwhelmed, or whatever, and knowing that you've got the kind of basic tools, muscle memory to know, and the courage and the confidence to go and practice that.
And the community,
because you can't do it alone. But actually, once you are working with community, you can start to do it alone because you're being supported, but you're building that ability then to become fully human, I would argue.
And community doesn't necessarily mean like a 50-member gathering,
right.
Like one of the things that has supported me through the last 3 months since I was here first, so there's a spot where I'm gonna on the land where I'm gonna go tonight as well, called Oak by Brook.
Oak by Brook, yeah.
And there's a big old oak tree by a brook. Would you believe?
Can you see what we did there?
Your naming genius, Daniel. But I after I spent the night there a few months back, I felt so held that night. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling like almost ecstatic, and when I got home with your guidance, I like one of the things I did was went and found an oak, and hilariously, I obviously stumbled out my door and like realised I was living where I'm staying at the moment was like 500 metres from Bushy Park, which is basically an oak forest, so lucky boy. But I found a particular tree, and when I've had in most of the difficult moments, and there have been quite a few over the last 3 months, I've gone back and sat under the oak, and that's felt like community. That has been community. It's not felt like it.
It makes me so happy to hear that you're exploring that, because
I mean, there's a reason why I'm back, Dan.
I know, but this is the thing, I mean, because there's oaks in my life that have saved me literally over the last few years, and I think this is the thing, right? It's like that story, that dominant story that we've all been a part of, has just, it's been several hundred years in the making, but it's been convincing us of the absurdity of that an oak could be that you could be in community with an oak tree, and obviously something all of our kind of, many of our indigenous brothers and sisters would have always known. It's family, it's kin, right? They were here before us, right? We're the kind of babies. Humans arrive after the trees.
I loved it. I saw the lovely Ella Saltmarsh.
Right.
You must have spoken to Ella on this.
Ella has been on years ago, and we are plotting another.
I feel like Ella needs to be another returning.
Yeah, we are plotting a return,
particularly for the oaks, because she's been.
She did the thing with the Marshmallow Laserfeast folks, didn't she? The installation in Kew. Yeah.
People, check this out. Ella Saltmarsh, total legend. But I saw Ella the other day, and she had a beautiful framing of this, which she was like. She was speaking on a panel, and she said, I'm going to encourage you to go and speak to a tree today, and I want to say to you, I know it's going to feel weird, and most people are going to think in your daily life are probably going to think you're a bit weird, but I want to reframe that. Like, it's only for about the last 80 years that most people have thought that it was weird. Most people on the planet have thought that it was weird to speak to a tree. Before that time, the majority of the global population would have taken it as normal and thought that the small but growing number of people who didn't speak to trees were the weirdos. Maybe there's something in that.
Yeah. Well, this is it, isn't it? Modernity has made us forget so much, and this is, this is the remembering, isn't it? We're being on, because if you go and experiment with that invitation, you'll feel it quite quickly.
We've got bees incoming there. Hope you can hear that.
And you think to yourself, well, let's talk about the oak. It's just that oak is sustaining at least a couple of hundred species that are existing off that tree, off that wise being that may live 400, 500, 600, 700 years old. Like, that's extraordinary, and there's a reason cultures on this land would gather under oak trees often for counsel and to and actually it's funny because I've been of recently as well, this local project we are Avon, we've been meeting under an oak when we have to do meetings, three of the co-directors, and it been
the oak has been a gathering tree through time.
That's it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's I think there's so much in it. Obviously what we're doing here is, we're growing a lot of oaks in the nursery here. We're trying to bring a plan to bring an oak forest back down on the bottom of the land, because we're pretty convinced from what we can tell that there would have been, hence Ghostwood. This was a wood many 100 years back. But also just seeing what happens when you start to open up to whatever it is, other more than human life, but trees particularly, oaks, all kinds of trees. There's so much story and myth and connection to be sort of uncovered in relationship with these trees. And like you said, not that long ago, the majority of the world saw this planet as animate, and as sentient. And it's a very, very recent thing that we have forgotten this. And again, the consumer story has told us it's nonsense, And so I think it's lovely to hear that you've found that gateway again of exploration, and my sense is exactly that. Community is there for us, and of course we need our fellow human beings, and that can be two of you. It doesn't need 2 or 3 people. You're into a community of practice, but like you say, there is an earth community that's there.
And I think I sort of want to re-emphasize that thing about, I'm really struck by the safe uncertainty thing at the moment, and it's coming back in this conversation. The idea that there isn't a right way, and therefore there isn't a wrong way. Like, you're not, and therefore your life is not a crime, right? Like, it's that sort of in a lot of ways I feel like this a big part of the task of getting out of consumerism is ending the sort of species level self-hatred, the species level self-rejection that we're in. Like, I don't think we're in this because and this is why I don't think it's really about vested interests or bad individuals or what, like all of that. I mean, I don't wish to appear naive either, but so much of this, like, yeah, there's something about this dynamic of self-rejection that I know is in me as well. Like, it's been a big part of what I've been working through, and some of what I want to leave behind is like judging myself to not be enough and not be doing enough and not be good enough and be fundamentally bad. Like, the idea that people are having your life is not a crime tattooed on their wrist, and I'm thinking about doing it myself, right? Like,
I think you should do it.
Okay. Actually, there's another Fasano line, as you know, which I think I might get tattooed on me, which is he says, if you cannot have a home become a song. And there is an irony in my work that I talk a lot about home and community and encourage people to commit to place, and don't really have a home myself, and I'm not convinced that my role is to have a particular home actually.
At this moment.
But sorry, yeah. But this thing of ceremony, safety, ceremony, community, safety in the uncertainty, like that self-acceptance that's in all of that.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. I mean, I guess that's the crew work that we're sort of playing with, really. You know, we've been trying this online and you know, bringing people together online when we do, and obviously now with the land here, but I think that's effectively what you've just, you know, that's really what a lot of it is about, is how do we create these spaces where we can develop these ways of being safe and uncertain in uncertain times, you know, and you know, there's a thing that I'd love to know your thoughts on, because one of the things that I've been kind of, another rabbit hole I've been going down recently with is and it's about this. So I tend to follow my nose. I tend to sort of just move where I feel like I need to go next, and this deeper, you know, we could call it composting work, you know. So for me, there's this sort of like the letting go of the consumer story, for example, and how that shows up for me as an individual, or, you know, whoever it is. And obviously the complexity of that, right, because it shows up in all those ways of, you know, the not enoughism, the stories of what I thought maybe I was going to become, or, you know, what was it that I was going to have, or how my life was going to play out, or, you know, and obviously everybody has variations of all of that going on. And so there's this, you know, this time we're in, and obviously it's, you know, different people are tackling this work in very different ways, and there are many people who've always been faced into this, you know, this uncertainty. But there's something about, I believe there's an unavoidable letting go that is coming for all of us of all kinds of things, right? If we're going to move through, you know, we're going to have to let go of a lot of, and I don't mean that in, I also believe that there's fucking gold to be found in that process, right? So for me, it's not yes, it's scary, yes, it can be fearful and difficult, and there's a lot of pain, but there is also a lot to be found in all of that. But it's almost like that's the stuff, in my experience, or at least from what I feel and sense and what I see, is that then starts to open up space that wasn't there, open up other ways of seeing things, or, you know, that might be your own sense of who you are, but also just seeing the world differently from what we thought it was. And also it can build this amazing, you know, if you've got community with you, but you can build or you can sort of start to grow a courage, a capacity, a creativity, you know, that wasn't accessible in the consumer story. Do you know what I mean? And so I guess just like, yeah, it just feels like, and therefore I guess the becoming more intentional about creating time, intention, space to do this work of letting go, of unlearning, of opening up space, of becoming more curious about uncertainty. That to me feels really key as part of weaving the citizen story, whatever the stories we're trying to bring into the world. It's not binary either or, it's all of it. And so, and yet I feel that is the stuff that is still the most difficult for many folks to step into.
The act of letting go.
Yeah.
The letting go is more difficult than the stepping into, I think.
Yeah.
It's like
because in Vanessa Angiotti's, the true composting, the composting of the logic that run deep within us.
Yeah.
That's such vital work.
Well, and that metaphor she uses of hospicing that again comes from the two loops. That idea of like how do you help something die with dignity?
Right.
Because if you fight too hard, it clings to life. Like,
right.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. Like, and I agree. I think maybe that's what I was saying before. Like, actually, the stepping into isn't so hard, really, and we'll make a mess of it. But but if we start doing it, we'll be game on.
Yeah.
Because it's who we are by nature, deep in us. But the letting go is the hardest part, and the self-rejection that makes us addicted to it. And I think maybe that's like that this macro conversation feels like it is the conversation in me. We've come back to this a couple of times. I feel like, in a way, dear listener, I am kind of using this conversation very selfishly. I'm sort of thinking about what question am I taking out onto the land, and I think it's something about like what do I need to do to be like fully available to the role I'm trying to play, to the work I'm trying to do now. Like because I'm almost fully available, but I'm not yet. What do I need to let go of? What do I need to grieve? What do I need to feel? What do I need to apologize for? What do I need to get excited about? Like, what do I need to, but to be fully available to it? And in some ways there's an arrogance to that question. There's an arrogance underlying that question, because there's a sort of like, I believe I have a role to play. And actually that there's a, like, I have a sense that, and I've said this to you before as well, like I have a sense that it may not, but my life may be about to get even crazier and might be a bit more in a spotlight or whatever. And so there is a sense of like preparation for that, or practicing for that. But I think I see it more actually as the letting go, as the making space. This language of being fully available has just kind of come up in my mind, and I think it's right. It's like, what would it look like to be really fully available to this work and to this phase of my work and life. And maybe I think the way I've designed these things to then step out of me a bit and to the broader reflection, I think I'm better in what works for me is cycles, is to and intermittent but deep spaces for reflection and processing and moving on another step, and then go out into the world and do it again.
We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. How bonkers is that? You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast.
If you'd like to support the running of the Spaceship Earth podcast, head over to our Substack and sign up. You'll get every episode straight to your inbox, weekly writing, plus other crew offerings. We're grateful for whatever you can give. Join us at becomingcrew.substack.com.
Yeah, bang on, and I think that's exactly it. It's cycles. I mean, that's how, as far as we can tell, that's how this life is operating, isn't it? It's through constant cycles.
Of course.
There's some. I guess this is just another live thing, but for me, that I'd love your perspective on, which is, So I think you sort of acknowledged. Sort of politically where things could head or sort of are heading in some ways. And I've been kind of, I guess, just really, again, sort of, it's connected to what we're talking about in terms of the what has shaped this, you could say has shaped the sort of global capitalist consumer story. But there's a quite a violent logic that sits under everything, you know, whether it's, the kind of, how this whole machine works. And obviously it's, it's kind of built on webs of suffering, right? Human more than human. And again, there's some of us in our society that are benefiting more than many others through this illusion of this modern way of being. So there's a kind of the earth is sort of powering everything, right? And so there's a violence there. But there's obviously also violence just in the, that sort of sits under the way we do things, the way decisions are made, the way that, again, the more attention you give to these things and the more you look behind stuff, the more you start to see. And this can then manifest in really, really tangible ways. Like, so I've been writing this piece at the moment and I'm going to record something, but it's about again, really trying to look at how this violent logic is so embedded. So as an example, I came across, back to the dancing, but, obviously I've been, I was a DJ for many, many years and still love my music. And, I was noticing this year, seeing a bunch of DJs that are starting to speak out about the fact that they've discovered that a lot of the festivals they're playing at have been bought out by these big entertainment investment funds in the last year. And there's one in particular that owns about 80 festivals in Europe. And they've been bought out by this US fund that has lots of investments in Israel. And it's turns out that many of those investments are in companies that are playing a part in the occupation. And so there's a bunch of DJs that are starting to go, from a moral perspective, they're starting to speak out about it, and it's been really interesting watching it unfold. So there's a really sort of tangible example. I mean, that's all, that's a kind of like the things that we thought were really sacred, like dancing together, for example. The money that's poured into that space over the years, it's insane. Sport. But, like the guy from Spotify 2 weeks ago, one of the founders, he's now leading a 600 million euro fund into military AI, So he's gone from streaming music and shafting every artist around, the business models, to putting 600 million into now, military AI apparently is the fastest growing part of the AI economy. And you're like, fuck me, we are in trouble. Like and it's acceptable. And then I look at, like, obviously there's what's been going on with Gaza, which I have found, very, very difficult, as many people have. But, now watching, the laws that were passed last week, on Palestine action. Maybe can I mention that, or am I going to get arrested? I don't know. But and then seeing, young people, women, elderly, being manhandled. I mean, you've been watching a lot of the way the demonstrations in Berlin, in particular, how Germany is responding to this stuff. Literally, the force now, the violence in police forces against non-violent protesters who are literally protesting to oppose the killing of innocent human beings. I don't know. So there's this violent logic, let's call it. I like to speak as like a code, a violent code that's sort of right under the surface, whether it's in capitalism and capital, or how capital's flowing, whether it's in behaviours.
Pretty much on the surface, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's just, and that's what I'm finding. And so again, in my sort of rambling neurodivergent mind, what it brings me back to all the time, again, is back to this work of the ability to let go and process and deal with suffering and confusion and fear. Because for me, so much of this is manifesting in fear for people. But I wonder, like, you're moving around a lot. You're with all kinds of groups. You also, you're working in these new democratic models and ideas. So, yeah, where does this stuff? Does it? What's your thoughts on all of this? Because it terrifies me that without, and for me, it comes back to the processing. I think we have quite a violent logic in us now as humans, and it's very easily activated. But it can be deactivated. And so there's something for me about these times where also this need to really understand the violence that is there, or at least learn how to see it and be aware of it. And it's being, it's playing out in relationships. It's playing out the way people run meetings. It's there. And so I'm sort of, I'm very curious about how we're also in these times, how we learn to see that stuff for what it is. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, I'll stop rambling, but does it bring up anything for you?
I mean, I think I'm hesitant to be oversimplistic, but in some ways it does just take me back to the two loops thing again, right? And it's like, that system is dying, and to some degree, if we fight it too hard and stare at it too hard, it clings to life, and it gets more violent as it does so. It's like, and I am not saying that we shouldn't. I am trying to find my voice more on Palestine, and I have been too quiet, frankly. And so we do need to speak, and we do need to give that some of our attention, and we owe people in those situations our attention as well. And the deeper work, the only work I believe is actually commensurate with the scale of that challenge is to build something else. Like, and so if you start where you started, that analysis was in the political systems, right? And I think, we were talking a bit before we started recording about the current moment and where in UK politics, and whether it's about a new party or a whatever. And I'm like, no, it's just not. I have zero interest really, because those things will always have to respond to where we're at, they're
not designed for dancing with complexity.
They're not designed for that. And yet there is also a truth that any of those parties could open up into more constructive space very quickly if and when we make it so visible and so unignorable that they have to. I think about this time last year, maybe almost to the day, when the riots happened in Southport. And the following Wednesday night, there was a list of 100 places that the far right were going to attack that was leaked on social media. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I remember, yeah, that's right.
And every single one of those places, at least 100 people and sometimes thousands came out to protect them, pretty much spontaneously. Like, there was a bit of organising going on, right, but pretty much spontaneously. Like, the list had only been out a few hours. In Newcastle, they had thousands of people, and I remember one of them was carrying a sign that said black, white or brown, everyone's welcome in Newcastle, with a picture of a Newcastle United shirt and a Nuki Brown ale bottle. And you're like, the humour and the rawness of and the outpouring of energy. And I know a bunch of the people in the community organisations that turned out and did the organising that made that happen, right? And the next day, I don't know if you know this, but the Daily Mail headline the next day, was something like, and I'll look it up and send it to you, get it right, but it was something like joyful protests turn back far-right thugs. Daily Mail headline. And imagine,
didn't last long though with them, did it?
So I'll tell you why it didn't, right? But the point is that window opened, even for them.
I'm being facetious.
And if Keir Starmer, like a bunch of us, me and a few people in think tanks and others were scribbling stuff and trying to lobby MPs, and could have been it. Like, if Starmer had made the speech wrote itself, right? Like, this is who we are. This is the energy we're going to need to take on. We face huge challenges on our time, but last night made me see that the power of community in this country is strong, and we can and will do this. Like, this is the energy that we can channel to. These moments, and if you think back to COVID, that moment when the story changed and they went from stay home to stay alert, like, and it could have gone to, that was around the time that 750,000 people had crashed the NHS first responder site, and there were mutual aid groups and street WhatsApp groups springing up all over the country. The story could have shifted to, let's do this together, like, we can do this. And it did in Taiwan. It's one of the stories I tell in the book, like the crowdsourced COVID response in Taiwan. It was there. So these, I guess what I'm saying is, like, it's not about, I don't think it's about putting our hope in any one politician or party or new party or existing or whatever. I think it's much more about, like, the most important political work of the time is to find one another, build, maybe start thinking about what rules we want democracy to run by, like the Chartists did in the 1840s, and see how they web together. There's an amazing campaign called Our House that is working on that, and that's got my political attention in the UK at the moment, and in other places. In Poland, I'm supporting a youth movement who have given up on electoral politics after winning the 2023 election for Tusk, and are now crowdsourcing what they call the Plan for Generations, because they just don't see that there's anything that makes available something that anyone could actually want to choose. So they're like, well, let's write it together. That's the energy, I think. It's not about playing by the rules. This is a constitutional moment, not a political moment. And so what that means, I think, is that it's not, there is no, we have to, back to, like, if we only give our attention to what is, and I'm not saying people are and it deserves some, but if we only give our attention to what's breaking and the awfulness, we are actually feeding it. And we have to also give our attention to what's building and what's emerging, because the stuff that is breaking is breaking. And the only work that is commensurate with the nature of that breakdown is to build what can catch it.
Yeah, and there's a little bit around the I've been thinking about again with the, even like that, you know, even the rights of nature work, the stuff I've been starting to do here and the land here. But again, if we're not exploring these alternative ways of, you know, everything from what we perceive has rights, what doesn't have rights, how we organise, how we think about access, how we think about life generally. Like, actually, now is the time to be piling into these ideas on the ground where you are and getting involved, because when things do fall apart, which they are, you know, again, it's that whole thing, isn't it? I can't remember who said it. It was someone, wasn't it? You know, whatever's, it's, you know, when things collapse, it's the ideas that are lying around.
Unfortunately, it was Milton Friedman.
Maybe not. There's something, but there's some truth there. Do you know what I mean? There's some absolute 100%. Truth, and that's why. And for me, again, it's both, and again, it's also about, like, you know, what is yours to do, right? We're all being invited in, I would suggest, to connect with the thing that we can bring this time, which can be, you know, it doesn't have, you know, as I always say to people, you know, it's just gonna be just like how you show up for your fucking family, you know, or how you showing up for yourself.
Ceremony.
You know, exactly. But if you're able to open up into other things where you live, or the organisations you're in, or whatever it is you do. And I guess the reason I just, you know, I guess the thing at the moment, and you know, Gaza for me is like a sort of like it's like an epicenter for the kind of mad violence of this time, and this absurd colonizing, occupying, you know, and it's allowed us to, for many of us, to see how much the countries that we thought, Britain, the West, you know, just how complicit all our countries are, in maintaining this very, very violent system, which we might experience as the consumerist story, right, as everyday people. But actually what is enabling it, what is holding it, is just full of violence, and is full of hypocrisy, and it's racist. Actually, it's very, very racist, and for me, this moment, the thing that I fear of is what I would call the apathy of. And again, and to your point, I'm not saying that everyone should be focusing in on the stuff that is just horrific to witness, but I do feel like there is an apathy that is being. And there's a hell of a lot of money that's being poured into keeping that apathy there. You know, I mean, the money that keeps sort of confusion and lies in the media and the culture. You know, I mean, if our mainstream media's had any integrity, or were allowed to have the integrity that's required in the last couple of years, we'd be in a very different place, I think. But anyway, here we are. But there is an apathy that worries me. That is this. You know, what happens when we again become more and more desensitized to suffering, suffering of some. Where does that lead us? Because ultimately, you know, again, what is being played out in particularly in this conflict is the level, the sophistication of violence and weaponry and military technology is so off the. I mean, we've never experienced such violent use of power and military force, and that stuff's going to come back into these societies that we're in. You know, it's like there's that whole saying, you know, once you accept how some places are treating people, and that your government's involved in that, and you just become apathetic to that, expect it to come this way at some point. You know, and I worry about the apathy. That's what I worry about. The you know, and it just feels we're in this moment of like, where's this going? And to your point about, you know, how things can be swayed, how things can shift through, I'm just still really curious about, like.
I guess what I would say is
most of the people in this country, from what we can understand, or the majority of people are so against, let's say, just specific with Britain's take on Gaza, right? It's complicitly in its military use, in its surveillance, in its intelligence, in its stance that it refuses to really put any sanctions on Israel of any kind of meaningful way, anything. And the majority of Brits are like, we don't want this. And yet it continues in silence. So when it comes back to the citizen story, and I'm like, where do we end up with this? Like, what's the intervention, or what else is available to us in this kind of moment?
Building. I honestly, like, I'm just like, I know it, but you have to. So my thing is, like, the world isn't sliding into violence and fascism because people are violent and fascist. The world is sliding into violence and fascism because the only choice, the only agency we perceive ourselves to have and are encouraged to believe that we have is a choice between two fixed options, essentially, at the ballot box. One of which is stick with the status quo, which claims to have some vague good intentions but is riddled with hypocrisy and lies and is pretty violent anyway, or full out violence that at least is honest and about it's like relatively honest about its intentions and has some and I think most importantly, I think I would argue, and from what I've engaged with and seen in many different countries, the greatest appeal of the kind of rising violence and fascism is essentially that they are at least validating the experience of people. Like, they're at least saying the world's pretty screwed up right now. We better, this is what I was saying about conservative realism right at the beginning. They're saying the world is broken. Those people, the other lot, the establishment, have broken it. The rational response to this, the realistic response right now, is to boot people out and militarize. And I understand the attraction of that. in that context, right? So the only thing we can do that is commensurate with the scale of that challenge is to build another fucking option. And the thing that I want to say is, like, this is not, the work of that is everyday, and it is human, and it is individual, and it is community, and it's small, and it's also really fucking big, actually. Like, and knowing, and I think in some ways what I see my role and the role of others who are trying to do this kind of work is to say this isn't small. Like, you are doing something big, and I'm right. Like, and there aren't many people yet. I believe there are others who have bigger voices than me, like Baratunde Thurston in the States and Ece Timurkuran, the Turkish writer, who are starting to tell these stories more, and I'm encouraging of that as well. But I can go to people and say, you use the phrase "land is kin" in this conversation. I just went to Montana, to a red state, to a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere, where I thought I was going to be walking into. I went to a Ideas and Music Festival on a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere in Montana, and I arrived, and the words "land is kin" were written in 20-foot high letters at the entrance to this thing. And it was a festival of. They didn't have the language for this, but it was a largely Republican voting festival of community wealth building and regenerative agriculture. Like, this is everywhere, and it's and when we, like, what we are doing, I think, like, and we have to trust in some of our own metaphors, right? Like, this is humans. This isn't. It may present as apathy, and in some people it may be apathy and overwhelm. But I think what's happening actually is that just underneath the surface, like the soil is, the seeds are ready, and this always happens with sort of true revolutions. It looks so unlikely until something pops up, and then the momentum builds. Like, look at what happened with the Arab Spring, with the Tunisian Revolution. Look at the Berlin Wall. Look at the humans. Like, we want something different, and if we can, we have to invest in the work of building it. And I think, like, the two, like I say, the species level self-hatred thing, the species level self-rejection thing has two manifestations. It has a manifestation in individual self-rejection and self-hatred. Like, and a lot of this, I think, is not so much apathy as, like, we're shit and I'm shit, actually, at some level. And then what the worst presences and voices in our politics tend to do is cultivate hatred of each other and lack of faith in each other. Like, the responses to COVID, I think, were particularly dangerous in this context. The sort of cultivating the kind of they're not looking after themselves, if you like, and we have, like, there's a Ece writes about this, Ece Timurkuran, and she has this she talks about, and I've been thinking about this increasingly, that she talks about choosing faith over hope as one of her sort of 10 choices for the better now, as the subtitle of her book Together. And she writes about, like, the, like, love of humanity, faith in human nature, is actually, like, a fucking serious political choice and commitment. It's not a Lonely Hearts Club. It's not a naive idealistic thing. It's a, like, no, like, we are all right. We can be all right. Our lives are not a crime. Like, and only if we believe that, and insisting on believing in each other, and stare into each other's eyes and invite each other into the best of ourselves, will that come through. And in some ways, like, that is maybe that's mad, but there is no other way. Like, you can't, if we let ourselves, the moment we let ourselves believe that underlying it people are fundamentally selfish, then we're just part of the same problem. We're just repeating the same story. And this is why I think about those moments like the Starmer and the riots. It's like I just believe we're so close to a different idea of who we are that it's just out of reach. And yet it's fundamentally different. And how we make ourselves available to that, and how we help each other be available to that, I think is the work.
Sounds like we might have come to a
Did that feel like it?
no, like a moment of I don't know how we've been rambling for, but we've been going for some time. I think. Where are we at? 90 minutes.
There you
Pretty
go,
good.
mate.
John, I could, we could keep going but we've got work to do, mate.
Yeah, mate.
We've got
You never know. We might come back and finish this off tomorrow once you've blown my brain with some trees.
Exactly. You might have a sort of strange run-in with a barn owl later. Or that fox might show up again, and you never know.
Can I read my little poem from
yes,
last time?
yes.
Shall
Please,
I do that
please.
as my closing?
Yeah. I was
And
gonna
then
say,
you can wrap us up. You can think about how you want to wrap it.
yeah, I'll do that.
So this is a thing I wrote after being on the land last time, and that I keep coming back to. And I've actually weirdly started writing poetry since.
So what happens, mate, when you jump into the becoming crew work?
Hang out with Dan Burgess, you start writing poetry.
We're just.
So this is I've called this The Fox and the Oak. So it goes: I'm still here, says the oak, and I, says the fox. So much damage in the chase for meaning. Yet still you stand, says fox, and still you roam, says oak.
Beautiful. With all of this shit going on in this moment we're in, what would you, from how you're experiencing things, what would you suggest folks pay attention to? Because we are in a time where our attention is being pulled everywhere.
I think the obvious answer is who's building, and what's building where you are. So maybe it's like I always ask the questions like, what do you love? And then who else loves it? And what can you do together? And I think paying attention to those things puts you on a cycle of appreciation that is fundamental right now. Because because what the consumer story in its capacity as a species level self-hatred construct will try and draw your attention to what's wrong and what's burning and what people aren't doing. And the most defiant act you can make is to pay attention to what people are doing.
Yeah, it's interesting because it makes me think as well, like when you're speaking about that, I often, I get weirdly curious about so many things, but I was being a sort of father of 3 youngsters, and I always notice how, again, you see this with the way a lot of grown-ups speak to youngsters. They'll go, what? So what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you leave school, or what are you going to, what are you going to do and then I always think, I don't know. So some of this is, again, it's connected, right? Because we could have a whole bloody episode on the younger generations and stuff, but that feels a particularly, and they are a generation whose attention, like many of us, but has been so, they're under so much pressure of, I've witnessed it with my kids, how, obviously how the things that we never had to deal with, that impacted our attention. I mean, there were lots of things that impacted my attention, but the social technologies were not there. But how what would you, how does that play out to say, is that the same invitation for a younger generation who essentially maybe, are looking, they haven't had that contextual understanding of the system in some ways, I guess, or at least the ability to see it for what many of us are beginning to see it for. Is that the same question? Is it the same response to sort of look for, think about what you love? And
I think so. I mean, I think, and I mean, what I've been saying with my new Polish friends is these same things. It's like, start from love. What do you love? What do you care about? But also, like, be again, this is the things I've said, be defiant in your faith in humanity. Like, if you see and hear people being dismissed, understand why they might be doing what is earning them dismissal, because there's probably a really good rational reason for it. You also feel like, and then build something that invites them into the best of themselves. Like this idea of the plan for generations in Poland is like, Poland has voted a far-right president back in, not because the people of Poland are far-right, but because the choice they were offered was a supposedly liberal candidate who no one believed in because he was closely affiliated with a government that hasn't done many of the things it promised it would do, and they couldn't mobilise behind him. So what could they mobilise behind, and how do you build that? There's so many invitations into lack of faith in one another in the world right now. And so paying attention to the best of who we are and the best of what we're capable of is I think a really radical act.
Beautiful. I have two final questions.
Hit me.
First one is I'm always curious, and you've experienced some of this, but this invitation of becoming crew, what does it speak to you about, Jon, at this moment in time?
All of it, man. No, all of what we've talked about, right? Like the metaphor of crew. I mean, it's the same. We're doing the same work. I've always believed that. It's
mine's been a bit more feral, probably, but
yeah, exactly. You got blue fingernails and a bunch of tattoos and some crazy ass facial hair, and I'm thoroughly clean shaven and well presented.
But we're orienting in the same direction. The invitation is.
I feel like I should have worn a suit for the photos of this recording, just to ham up the vibe. But no, it's the same. Crew is, and crews stand by each other, right? Maybe I'll emphasise that bit, like, because I do think that's one of the greater challenges that I'm realising is central to my work, is like, do not lose faith in one another. And from my time in rowing, like, you have to believe in your crew.
So this is a new question that I'm sort of exploring as a way of like figuring out who to bring on the podcast next. But knowing what you know about the sort of random explorations,
who would be sufficiently weird and unexpected? So there's two people that spring to mind, if I can cheat.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, fuck it. It's the first time I've done it.
So
let's just break the rules immediately, Jon. It's fine.
So one is someone, because I am, as you know, really fascinated by what your work in particular and your voice in particular could be for young men. And there's a lad who I've come across recently who I think is seriously impressive human. A guy called Sam Squire, who's CEO of something called Inspire to Ignite. Which is basically a kind of, I mean, it's hard to describe, but it's essentially a kind of a movement that's taking over spaces and making them available to young people to like find their way, essentially. And Sam was a pro footballer who got chucked out, failed by the world's assessment. Had a seriously tough time, age 19, and he's 25, is now CEO of this thing, is a total legend. I'd love to know what you made of him and he made of you. And then the other one is Amara Spence. Very differently.
Actually, Mara and I have been trying to do that. We've been trying to organise a conversation, and we nearly did it. So that is definitely going to happen.
So I've given you young white man and wild ass, amazing young black woman.
Yeah, no, we've been trying, and we actually had a date, and then there was illness, but that's reminded me to get Amara.
I think Amara is one of the most inspiring and most rich thinkers I've come across. Any moment spent with her is a good moment.
Thanks for that, John. Thank you, as ever. It's great because we're now going to go and hang out on the land, and we've got all kinds of things. So it feels good. But I was just what you do and how you show up and how you're evolving yourself in this way, and putting your doing this in the wild. It's beautiful, and you do that, and it's just amazing to watch what you do. And I do worry about you sometimes because you the energy that you put into this and your relentlessness, but I'm delighted that you are finding your oak kin, and I really hope. I'm convinced they will look out for you if you pay them attention. So yeah, just big respect as ever, John, for all you do, and thanks for coming and trusting me in this and whatever it is that I'm doing. And thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
So, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jon, recorded out on the land at Ghostwood Down. I'd love to hear from you for whatever you might have received through that conversation. So helpful for me to, receive feedback from these conversations. So if something has stirred or confused or is alive or has caught your curiosity, please let us know. Drop us an email, hello@thespaceship.earth. Post a comment on Instagram, post a comment on the Substack, whatever, medium, channel, platform is preferred. Or just, sit quietly and sort of send me a kind of message through the power of universal connection. It's all appreciated. And if it has stirred something up in you, come and get involved come and join in with some of our crew offerings. I say best way to do that is to visit becomingcrew.com. That's our action learning collective. Or sign up to the Substack becomingcrew.substack.com, and you'll get updates from all of our invitations and gatherings that are coming as we move into the darker time of the year here in the Northern Hemisphere. Anyway, links to all of Jon's work in the show notes. The more of us that step in to these times, that step into the uncertainty and start to find the things around us, the faster and more beautiful the changes will be, is my opinion. We're all needed. There's no way out of this spaceship. We're all part of it. So, on that, take good care of yourselves. Keep hugging people around you. Keep getting out onto the land. Talk to the trees. There are elders. They have a lot of wisdom to share with us. Talk to the other beings. Get your hands in the soil. Tend to something that's alive, that is more than human. I tell you, these things work. And not only do they work, they open doors and portals to other ways beyond what this current civilization of modernity can offer us. Anyway, on that, I'm off to the woods. Thank you so much for listening. Your support is so appreciated. Until next time, peace and out.
This podcast is created in service to life, for you. it takes time, funds and energy to make. If you'd like to contribute to the running costs, you can donate the price of a cuppa or a pint. Find the link on our website. This podcast wouldn't exist without the following crew: Charlie Shred, Audio Jedi; Seaman Home Burgess, Engine Room; Willow Burgess, Jingles.
Beep, 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 beep.